Hi, welcome to Platypus Knitting. My name is Bobbie Olan and I am a knitter based in Melbourne, Australia. I am starting up this blog as a place for me to share my thoughts and experiences in knitting, my thoughts on fibre arts and living a creative, crafty life in general. So as this is the first episode, I thought I'd just give you a brief introduction, just kind of my knitting and crafting history. So it should be a pretty short episode to start with. I'm still figuring out what all the different segments will be, if I even want segments or if I just want more of this general chit chat segment that I like to call Craft for Thought, that I'm going to be starting at least the first few episodes with, kind of just me rambling on, spilling out my brains. So I am starting this vlog because I am a bit of an introvert. I'm pretty shy, so I find it really hard to look for groups, for one thing. I don't really have a knitting group that I am a part of, and I've kind of been missing that connection to community. So I'm hoping that by starting this vlog where I sort of get used to talking about what I'm doing, what I'm working on, what I'm learning, what I like and what I don't like, all of those things, then it will hopefully give me the confidence to actually sort of reach out and find people in real life to connect to. Although, of course, connecting online is wonderful as well, but I am still even pretty shy about doing that. So that's a really big part of why I want to start this vlog, as a confidence building exercise. I also kind of want to use it as a kind of motivation tool or an accountability tool or whatever you want to call it. For a while now I've kind of been interested in designing my own knitwear, but lack of confidence and things like that have always sort of stopped me from getting started. Or I've had a couple of ideas and when I go to swatch them, one swatch and I don't like it and I kind of just give up. So again, it's just to do with building up my self-confidence, and hopefully if I share ideas of things that I'm thinking about designing, I can get some feedback on whether people are actually interested in that, whether they think it's a good idea, and if I should go ahead with things. I think that's actually all that I kind of have to say about that. I should say that I did start knitting for the very first time in 2008, and I'm not very good with years and timelines and remembering when anything happened, but I do remember that pretty clearly, not quickly, that was when I started, because that was when I was in third year of uni. And like I said, I am based in Melbourne, and in the third year of uni we did work placements, and my partner did a placement up in Sydney, and for the first half of the year I did my placement here in Melbourne, but I missed him, so I went and followed him up to Sydney. The thing is, his placement was full-time, whereas mine was only part-time, so I kind of picked up knitting as something to just fill the time. I cannot remember at all why it's what I chose to do. I have an aunt who's very crafty and creative, and she does a lot of knitting as well as a lot of other crafts, but I don't think she was the influence then. I really have no idea why I picked it, but I just remember buying one of those kits from Lynn Craft that came with a pair of needles, a giant safety pin, a stitch a row counter and a few stitch markers and just a really basic booklet on casting on, how to do a knit stitch, how to do a purl stitch, and I kind of started with that, and I remember not really liking it that much, and I think I probably gave up as soon as that 6 months of placement in Sydney was done and we came back to Melbourne. But you know, back then I didn't really know what I was doing. It was all self-taught, and I remember that I couldn't tell the difference between knits and purls back then, and I remember I was just doing the most basic things. I think I knit a garter stitch scarf for my grandma, and I tried to knit like I wouldn't even call it color work, but a patchy sort of color work scarf for my friend and myself, and I remember picking it up and looking at it and being like, I don't know what I'm up to. I don't know if I'm on a knit row or a purl row. I know garter stitch, you're just knitting back and forth anyway, but I just could not understand where I was and what I was doing, and so it came out very sloppy, and I lost interest pretty quickly. So with that experience, I don't know why I decided to pick it up again, but I did, and this one I'm not really sure exactly when I picked it up, but I would hazard a guess that it was probably end of 2014, start of 2015, and I think that's a pretty good guess because I had gone back to uni, and 2014 was again my third and final year of that second course that I did, and in 2015 my partner got a job in San Francisco, so again I went over there to try to find a job myself, and so I could stay with him. And I remember the first garment that I knit was a little sweater for my nephew, and I was very excited to be in the US. I had heard of Lion Brand yarns while still in Australia. I don't know how, it must have been recommended in some pattern that I got, but I was pretty keen to order some Lion Brand yarn and not have to pay crazy shipping fees or have to wait a really long time when we got to the US. So I definitely know that I was knitting at least at the end of 2015, but back then, I mean, I wasn't completely in love with it. I remember doing a lot of cross stitch while I was over there as well, but that was when I, you know, learned to recognize what the different stitches look like and how to, you know, read your knitting and you know, count rows properly, because I would even get confused initially about how to count rows. Am I moving the stitch marker so that is that the row that I'm on, or is that the row that I've just finished, which just seems really stupid now, as something that I would have gotten stuck on, but I do remember getting stuck on that. But yeah, anyway, I finished that little sweater for my nephew, and that was pretty exciting to have like a little garment that someone was actually going to wear. So that was definitely the start of me getting, of me falling in love with knitting, and I really am in love with it now. I have done other crafts in the past, but now, even though, you know, I see things on the internet and I feel like, oh, I'd really love to learn that kind of embroidery, or I'd really like to do more cross stitch or more bookbinding, or, you know, develop my skills in crochet, it always comes back to, well, if I'm going to do that, then I'm not going to have time to knit these 101 things that I want to knit and learn all these things about knitting that I want to learn. So I never go back to those other crafts, but one day I'm sure I will. Anyway, so that brings me to the next segment, which is just a really tiny one that I like to call Stat Chat. I really enjoy the maths of knitting, and this isn't really to do with maths at all, but I like numbers. So Stat Chat is just me presenting a random set of statistics on something to do with knitting or crafting or fiber arts or what have you. So for my first Stat Chat, I can say that I have been knitting for at least 7 years. As I mentioned, I have done other crafts in the past, so I learnt cross-stitching when I was probably in primary school, but I couldn't say when. So I have been cross-stitching for at least 20 years. I have also worked as a bookbinder, so all in all I'd say I probably got over or around 4 years experience actual bookbinding, so making books by hand. And the last little stat to throw out there is I have knit over 38 projects. So some of those are really tiny, just things like baby beanies, but there are a couple sweaters in there, and I do want to knit more sweaters and more garments and that kind of thing. So that is Stat Chat. Yeah, so I think most of this vlog really is going to be more of me sharing my thoughts and musings, and all of these little segments that I'm coming into now. They'll probably be quite short, but who knows. So the next segment that I want to talk about is eye candy. So I just want to kind of spotlight on a knitting pattern that I am interested in making, or something that I've seen recently or at some point in the past that has sparked my interest in some way. So as this is my first episode of my vlog, I thought it would be most appropriate to share the very first item. I believe it's the very first pattern that I favorited on Ravelry, and I discovered it through the very first knitting podcast I ever listened to, and I think it might have been even their very first episode. I didn't actually go back and check all of this, so I'm just going by memory, so sorry if I'm wrong. So a lot of firsts there, so I thought it would be appropriate to share that in this, my first episode. So I heard about the Fuse pattern by Veronique Avery on the, I believe it was the Stash and Burn podcast, so their first episode, and they had a little section, I think they call it fantasy knitting, so knits that they want to be making. I really should have fact checked all of this earlier. Anyway, so yeah, the Fuse pattern, I've been wanting to make it for a really long time, but it's only recently, really in the last year, that I have felt comfortable enough in my skill to spend money on patterns. Before that, I was really just focusing on what I could get for free, because yeah, I wasn't really sure if I was good enough to be making these patterns by all these wonderful designers. So yeah, so Fuse has been sitting in my queue and in my favorites on Ravelry for a while, and it's just this lovely cardigan with a bit of a lace pattern. But what I really love about it is that you can kind of like button one side of it up around your neck, so that it kind of has like a shawl look. Yeah, and I just think that looks really cozy and comfortable, and also just very beautiful. So that, again, is the Fuse pattern by Veronique Avery. That is in the Brooklyn Tweed Wool People 2 collection. So this year I have a goal of knitting through my stash, and I'm pretty sure I have yarn that's been in my stash for years now, that I had already earmarked for the fuse pattern. I need to go back and just make sure that, you know, it's the yarn, that it's the right weight of yarn that the pattern calls for, and that I still like the color that I picked out, because I've had it in my stash for so long. Who knows, I don't think my tastes have changed that much, but we will see. So that's it for eye candy for this episode. The next segment is handy dandy. So that is just going to be a section where I either talk about what I'm working on or what I have finished. So the first thing that I want to discuss is this sweater here, which is the Greenwich pattern by Martin Story. So that is a Rowan Knits. It's on, I think it's in 2 collections, although I'm not really sure the first one is a collection. It might just be, you know, their all of their patterns that they have online on Ravelry, because I think it's just called Rowan on Ravelry. But the other collection is Easy DK Knits, and this is actually a free pattern. So it is the first complete garment that I've done in Fisherman's Rib. I did teach myself Fisherman's Rib just to do a button band on some cardigan that I made up, which I don't think was too successful, and I messed up some things and I didn't really understand it. But this was really great to do because I got so much practice in Fisherman's Rib that I'm actually comfortable enough with it that I have been able to fix mistakes. I've been able to run down and fix mistakes in the knitting, which I know I was not able to do before when I first tried to teach myself how to do it. I just did not understand how all the stitches and all of the rows kind of worked together. But I definitely feel like I can follow it now, because I have fixed a few mistakes that I found in this pattern. So this was this was a really great knit to do. I did look a lot at the finished projects in Ravelry before I started, just to see if there were any changes that I wanted to make. A lot of people, I think, had made the lengths the same, so they didn't want it to be, you know, this big difference between the front and the back, or, you know, they even made it not so extreme. I thought I'd follow the pattern and just see how it looked, because I mean, you know, Martin Story had that design for a reason, and I actually quite like it. I think it looks quite cute that from the front it looks like a cropped sweater, but I do also like having length at your back, so I actually think that's quite good. The only change I made to the pattern was to make the sleeves shorter. So going by the schematics, because my row gauge was different from the pattern's row gauge, although my stitch gauge was exactly fine. Based on people's comments, they said that it grew a lot. So I made the sleeves shorter but only by about 5 centimeters. And I actually feel like I probably could have shortened it a bit more, maybe up to 10 centimeters, but I was concerned about making it too short, and then what if it didn't actually stretch at all. So I have blocked this. I only took it off the blocking mats this morning, and for me it's actually the perfect length sleeve at the moment, but this is not for me. This is for my sister who is living in London, and I hope she isn't watching, because I am planning this to be her birthday present at the end of the year. So yeah, Kaz, hope you're not seeing this. Yeah, I've knit it really early because I tend to take a really long time with garments, usually about, you know, halfway through or 3/4 through. I decide that I want to change, and I put it away and start something new and then completely forget about it. So I thought I'd knit this one super early so that it's definitely done in time for her birthday in December, and now I don't need to think about it again. I think I just have to snip some loose yarns. I wove in all the ends before blocking, but I didn't want to cut any of the threads just in case, you know, they were pulled in a little bit more or anything like that, or they need a little bit of tweaking. But yeah, is there anything else that I want to say about this pattern? I don't think so. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and like I said, I like the cut front and the long back, so I hope that my sister does too. Most of my knitting actually has been for other people. I think I have two items that I have made for myself, both of which were test knits that I just spotted on Instagram, and I thought they looked so pretty that I had to try, and then I've kept those two for myself. But of the 38 or so knitting projects that I've done, yeah, most of them have been gifts for other people. So focuses for the year are knitting through my stash, so I'm not allowed to buy any new yarn. All projects this year have to be out of yarn that I already own. And yeah, the other focus is that I would like to make more for myself. Yeah. So the very last segment that I just want to end this on is Heartful of Craft. I'm not sure about that name yet, but for now at least I'll call it Heartful of Craft, where I just want to share a little gratitude that I have in my crafting life. So my very first one, which I'm sure will come up again and again, is that I am grateful for having such a supportive partner. He has always just been really, really supportive of my crafting interests and my creativity during the week, every day after work, or you know, after we finish dinner. He's always asking, is it time for knitting now? Is it time for knitting now? And he's always encouraging me to pursue what I want to do, to try all the new things that I want to try, and to just really prioritize those things in my life. Yeah, and it's really wonderful to have. He's never sort of like, if there's something that I'm interested in buying, for example, he's never sort of had any hesitancy about, you know, are you really gonna use that yarn? Don't you have so much at home? He never says those kind of things. He's always just really supportive. So yes, Heartful of Craft. He has a heart full of craft for me. So I guess that is the end of this first episode of Platypus Knitting. Sorry if it was a bit messy. I'm still a bit nervous about doing this, building up my confidence, and hopefully it all becomes a bit more streamlined in the future. But thank you so much for watching. I haven't decided yet how often I want to be putting these vlogs out, but at the moment I am thinking fortnightly, so hopefully I will see you in a couple of weeks for episode 2. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.